The White House bustled with preparation. Staffers rushed down marble corridors, floral arrangements were set in place, and a buzz of anticipation filled the East Room. President Trump was hosting an exclusive cultural forum, bringing together key figures from politics, media, and Hollywood. It was meant to be a symbolic event, a rare attempt to bridge the gap between Washington and the entertainment industry. Among the guest list, one name sparked whispers across political and media circles. Stephen Colbert. He had made no secret of his disdain for Trump's administration in interviews and on his late-night show. His invitation raised eyebrows, not just because of his views, but because he'd never once stepped foot inside the Trump-era White House, but this time he accepted. Seated quietly near the podium, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen reviewed his notes. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his calm demeanor radiating under the chandeliers, Joel wasn't intimidated. He was used to being scrutinized. Too positive for some, too focused on faith for others, too successful. But he had a message here, and he wasn't going to let cynical mockery cloud his purpose. The room gradually filled with famous faces and powerful figures. Anderson Cooper, Elon Musk, even members of Congress mingled with film directors and writers. Then the buzz spiked. Stephen had arrived, dressed in sleek black. His signature wit radiated as he stepped in, greeting people with poised sarcasm. Reporters in the back leaned forward, sensing something would happen tonight. Joel watched him quietly. Stephen eventually found his seat, 3 rows away from the podium, directly in Joel's line of sight. The two had never met, but Stephen had thrown jabs at pastor, television preacher, and businessman Osteen's appearances or statements on his late-night show before, calling him the prosperity prophet of Pennsylvania Avenue and suggesting his faith had become a political accessory. Joel never responded until now. President Trump opened the evening with brief remarks, then stepped aside for a panel discussion titled Narratives That Shape a Nation. That's when it happened. The moderator invited remarks from the audience. Stephen stood up unprompted and took the mic. "I just find it fascinating," he began, his voice dripping with ironic charm, "that we're here discussing narratives that shape a nation in a room featuring a pastor who perhaps sees this as an opportunity for spiritual growth, or maybe a prime-time slot for divine messaging." Laughter rippled through a segment of the audience. Stephen added with a smirk, "I imagine our good pastor, television preacher, and businessman is probably considering the optimal branding strategy for his response right now." The insult landed, cameras turned, murmurs spread, a few gasps, a few chuckles. Joel didn't blink. He looked down at his notes once, closed the folder, and stood up slowly. The moment was about to shift. Joel stepped into the center aisle with quiet resolve. The chandeliers above him shimmered, but his expression remained still, almost unreadable. He walked calmly toward the podium, his steps echoing softly against the marble floor. The silence was loud, the kind of silence that demanded attention. Stephen Colbert leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing a smirk that said, "Let's see what he's got." Joel reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. His hands didn't tremble. His heart didn't race. He'd faced harder rooms than this. Cynics who doubted his message, viral ridicule online, moments of spiritual questioning. But tonight was different. This wasn't about politics alone. It was about purpose and respect. He looked across the room, his eyes locking momentarily with Stephen's. And then he began. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen said, his voice even, calm. "But apparently some people come to the White House not to listen or collaborate, but to perform." The room held its breath. "I've been called many things: a spiritual salesman, a prosperity prophet, a political opportunist. It used to bother me, but then I realized something. People only call you names when they can't argue with your message." A few murmurs, some nods. "Stephen," Joel said directly, turning toward the comedian, actor, writer, and television host without an ounce of hesitation, "you've built a career portraying yourself as a champion of truth, a satirist holding power to account, and yet tonight in real life, you chose to mock a man of faith, not because he was wrong, but because he was an easy target for cynical laughter." Stephen's smirk faded just slightly. The room's tone shifted. "You see, I didn't grow up on late-night sets. I didn't go to comedy school or dine with network executives. I grew up in a humble ministry, building a message of hope from the ground up. I got to where I am by staying true to my calling, by outserving people who never thought I belonged, including people like you." A slow wave of attention swept over the crowd. Joel had everyone now, even the cameras, even the critics. This wasn't a sermon, this was a slow, controlled rebuttal, one rooted not in anger, but in conviction. I've been sharing a message of hope and possibility with the American people. You may not agree with my path, that's your right, but tonight you made this personal. You didn't attack a philosophy, you attacked me. Joel paused. And that's the difference between us. I live for something bigger than myself. You mock to entertain. Stephen shifted in his seat, his fingers curled slightly at the edge of the chair. Joel's voice didn't waver. I don't need to rehearse authenticity. I live it. I don't need to pretend to be a truth teller on a screen. I speak truth here, in the room you tried to humiliate me in. The crowd was no longer sure how to react. It wasn't applause yet, it was awe. Joel let a final line fall like a blade. And if you think your fame gives you the right to belittle people who strive to inspire this country, then maybe you should have stayed in Hollywood, where laughter is sought for a moment, not earned through a lifetime of conviction. He stepped back from the podium, and for a moment, just one. No one said a word, not even Stephen. The silence cracked slowly, like ice under weight. Then came the first response, a hesitant clap from a corner seat, followed by another, and then a third, stronger, louder. Within seconds, the East Room of the White House, once held hostage by tension, erupted into applause. It wasn't polite or obligatory. It was visceral. Joel didn't smile. He didn't bow. He simply returned to his seat, his chin slightly raised, his expression unshaken. For him, this wasn't about winning a room. It was about restoring his own voice in it. Stephen Colbert sat motionless, his arms still crossed, but the earlier smirk was gone. His face was carefully composed, but his eyes revealed something else, a flicker of disbelief. It wasn't that Joel had spoken, it was how he had spoken, with clarity, control, and an undeniable sting of truth. Anderson Cooper, seated near the press row, leaned over to a CNN producer and whispered, "We may have just witnessed a moment that redefines public discourse." The crowd was now split. Hollywood elite at one end exchanged quiet glances, unsure whether to defend Stephen or respect Joel's conviction. On the other end, conservative leaders, including lawmakers and Trump aides, beamed with pride, some whispering to one another, "He just made history." President Trump himself stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, watching everything. He didn't speak, but his nod, slow and deliberate, sent a clear message to his inner circle. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen wasn't just a spiritual leader anymore. Stephen leaned forward, finally picking up the mic again. His voice was softer now, a bit hesitant. "I didn't mean to offend, I was just trying to make a point. Perhaps it came out wrong." It was an attempt at humility, but it fell flat. Joel didn't respond. He didn't need to, but someone else did. A young Marine dressed in formal uniform standing near the back wall stepped forward slightly. "Sir," he said, nodding toward Joel, "thank you for speaking what a lot of us feel but never get to express." The room turned. His voice had pierced through the tension like a bullet through smoke. Joel simply nodded back, his lips tight but respectful. Stephen looked away. This wasn't how the night was supposed to go. He came expecting applause for his usual one-liners, not pushback from a spiritual leader. He'd underestimated Joel, not just his message, but his unwavering presence. And that mistake had been broadcast in front of political leaders, military members, and millions watching online. Outside on X, the moment had already gone viral. Clips of Joel's response spread like wildfire. Hashtags like Osteen's conviction and satire silence began trending within minutes. Conservative commentators declared it the night truth resonated. Even some moderate voices chimed in, calling it a powerful defense of constructive dialogue. Inside the East Room, though, a strange calm returned. Joel sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap, his expression serene under the lights. He didn't look around. He didn't revel in the applause. He was already thinking ahead. He knew this wasn't over. Because when you challenge someone like Stephen Colbert, the backlash isn't far behind. The East Room gradually returned to its ceremonial calm, but the air still crackled with unspoken tension. Though the applause had faded, its echo remained in every glance, every shifting seat, every phone buzzing silently in the laps of aides and reporters. Joel stayed poised, his gaze forward, but his phone, face down in his pocket, was already lighting up like a Christmas tree. Outside the White House, the internet was boiling. A 30-second clip of his line, "Maybe you should have stayed in Hollywood," where laughter is sought for a moment, not earned through a lifetime of conviction, hit over 500,000 views in under 10 minutes. Conservative influencers blasted it out like a war cry. Liberal accounts tried to spin it as scripted spiritual theater, but even they couldn't deny the precision in Joel's words. One major news network posted, "Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen silences Stephen Colbert in brutal White House exchange," and it's all on video. Even TikTok got in on the action with new remixes of Joel's moment into dramatic edits. A trending soundbite emerged, Joel's calm but cutting voice layered over his cinematic music. "You mock to entertain. I live for something bigger than myself." Back in the room, Stephen Colbert sat rigid, occasionally forcing small talk with people nearby. But the damage was already done. He had walked into the White House expecting to dominate the narrative and left the stage with a bruise to his public persona. Joel wasn't gloating, he never did. But in a private hallway moment just minutes later, his communications assistant Mark caught up to him, eyes wide. "You just detonated the internet," he whispered. "Ben Shapiro retweeted you. Candace Owens is already calling you the future of inspirational conservatism." Joel exhaled slowly, but his voice remained steady. "Good," he said. "Then they're listening." Trump's senior aide, Stephen Miller, approached next. No words, just a pat on his shoulder and a knowing look. "He'll respond," he murmured. "Hollywood doesn't like being embarrassed." Joel nodded. Meanwhile, Stephen's PR team had already begun crafting a response statement to the press. It was a light-hearted jest, they wrote, misinterpreted. "Stephen has deep respect for spiritual leaders," but screenshots of his smirk, his scoff, his timing, all told a different story, and America had already picked sides. Later that evening, as pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen returned to his temporary office in the West Wing, he finally checked his phone. Over 300 new messages, including a direct text from President Trump himself. "You just rewrote the rules. Proud of you." He stared at the message, then flipped open his laptop to draft a press statement. Not about Stephen, not even about himself, but about the dignity of conviction. If the country was watching, he wanted to remind them what they were really seeing. A man not afraid to share his truth, and a message no longer willing to be silenced. Outside, the headline screamed, but inside Joel's mind, he was already preparing for round two. The morning after the White House event, the sun hadn't even crested above the PTOAC before the media storm rolled in. Joel woke up to his phone vibrating nonstop, notifications cascading in from every platform. CNN was running a panel titled, "Did Pastor, Television Preacher, and Businessman Joel Osteen Go Too Far?" MSNBC's morning host questioned his tone. It felt aggressive, disrespectful even, especially to a cultural icon like Stephen Colbert. On The View, Whoopi Goldberg clutched her coffee cup and scoffed. "Another televangelist with a political agenda. Congratulations, Joel. You've just turned the White House into a Sunday service." Joel sat in his temporary White House office, flipping through channels with an unbothered expression. He'd expected the backlash. In fact, he welcomed it because without challenge came no opportunity for deeper truth, and with deeper truth came greater influence. But what he didn't expect was what came next. Stephen Colbert released a video statement direct to his millions of followers, filmed in what looked like his New York apartment. Stephen leaned casually against a bookshelf, his tone far from apologetic. "Last night I made a joke. I thought it was funny. Clearly others didn't. But let's be honest, if being called out by a pastor rattles the entertainment industry, then maybe we've gone soft. That said, I won't be silenced by someone whose job it is to preach positivity in the face of complicated truths." The clip ended with a characteristic smirk. Joel watched it once, then again. He didn't flinch. A knock came at his door. Mark stepped in, eyes wide with concern. "It's already got 6 million views," he said, holding up his phone. "They're painting you as some power-hungry preacher." Joel leaned back, folding his arms. "Good," he said calmly, "because I've got something they can't spin. A message of unwavering conviction." He tapped his desk, pulling out a file labeled "Hollywood and Hypocrisy, Prepared Remarks." Mark raised a brow. "You wrote a statement?" Joel nodded. "Not a statement, a reminder." The comms team got to work. By noon, a press briefing was announced. A special one, open to all outlets. No pre-screened questions, no topic restrictions. And yes, Stephen's name would be mentioned. The West Wing press room buzzed with energy. Reporters from every major network squeezed in. Bloggers, influencers, and even some late-night writers showed up just to see if Joel would back down. He didn't. At exactly 1:00 p.m., he walked to the podium in a crisp navy suit, his presence commanding at the collar. He paused for a moment, surveying the room. Cameras clicked, lights brightened, And then he began. Last night, I was mocked by someone who's never spent a day delivering a message of hope in challenging times. Today, I'm here to remind America what true conviction looks like and why we must never confuse celebrity with moral leadership. Gasps. This isn't about Stephen Colbert. This is about every person of faith, every struggling American who's ever been talked down to because they didn't have a network deal, a book tour, or a blue check mark on social media. The room froze. Phones shot up. Some hands even clapped. Joel continued, "You can mock me, but you can't mock the values I represent. Faith, perseverance, and the power of a positive message. And if standing up for those things makes me a villain to Hollywood, then I'll wear that badge proudly." He didn't need a script. He didn't need applause. He had the floor and the nation's attention. By the time Joel stepped down from the podium, the press room had already exploded online. His final line, "And if standing up for those things makes me a villain to Hollywood, then I'll wear that badge proudly," was now a rallying cry on conservative social media. Clips hit TikTok and X at lightning speed, cut between images of church congregations, community volunteers, and inspirational landscapes. But the applause came with consequences. By evening, a coordinated counter-narrative surged forward. A headline from Vanity Fair read, "Joel Osteen's Moral Crusade, Faith or Calculated Performance." BuzzFeed posted a slideshow titled, "10 times Stephen Colbert used his platform for justice and got mocked by a televangelist." Even late-night writers joined the fray, tweeting about spiritual opportunism cloaked in performative piety. But Joel knew something they didn't. He wasn't performing. At 7:43 p.m., his personal phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Don't forget where you came from. You're not better than the rest of us. Be careful." No name, no context, just venom. Mark stormed into his office minutes later, his face pale. "Joel, they're digging into your past." "What do you mean?" "They're posting photos, your early ministry, your family's financial records, even old social media posts. One progressive blog claims your sermons are radical." Joel leaned back in his chair. "So this is what Hollywood does when they lose the microphone." Mark looked rattled. "They're trying to paint you as dangerous." Joel didn't flinch. "Let them try. I'll remind them what real danger is. When people stop speaking truth because they're afraid of being destroyed for it." He pulled out a letter from his desk drawer, a handwritten note from a woman in Kansas. "I lost my husband to fentanyl. Thank you for reminding them that our pain matters too." Joel held it for a moment, then looked up. "This is who I speak for. Not Twitter, not press rooms. Real Americans seeking hope." Meanwhile, in New York, Stephen Colbert was preparing for an appearance on his own late-night show. His publicist reviewed talking points, downplay the exchange, emphasize humor, stay witty. But behind the scenes, his team was livid. Joel had flipped the spotlight. And worse, he'd done it without yelling, without hysteria, with clarity and calm. That made him dangerous in a different way. In D.C., Joel's communications director entered the room. "Fox News wants you tomorrow. Hannity's asking for a solo segment." Joel nodded. "Tell them I'll be there." But before the aide could leave, Joel paused. "No special setup, no dramatic lighting. I want to walk in as I am. This isn't a performance. It's a testament." Mark smiled faintly. "You really aren't like them." Joel shook his head. "That's the point." Outside, cameras flashed. Protesters with handmade signs gathered at the gates, some shouting his name, others cursing it. The noise was deafening. But inside, Joel sat quietly, his demeanor reflecting a soft glow of conviction. He didn't pray for silence. He prayed for strength. The following evening, the Fox News studio was buzzing with quiet tension. Producers whispered behind cameras, editors hunched over their stations, and makeup artists waited in the wings. Though pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen had declined their services, he had come exactly as he said he would. A well-tailored navy suit, his hair neatly combed back, a serene expression. At exactly 9 p.m., Sean Hannity's voice echoed into living rooms across America. "Tonight, we bring you the man at the center of a national firestorm. He's been called everything from inspiring to opportunistic, depending on which side of the screen you're on. But love him or hate him, he's not backing down." Joel Osteen joins us live. The camera panned to him, calm, steady, no hesitation. "Joel, Hannity began. "Last night, you went toe-to-toe with one of the most celebrated comedians in Hollywood. Today, you're being dragged online again. What do you say to people who think you've gone too far?" He looked straight into the camera. "I say I didn't go far enough." That sentence broke social media in half. Joel continued, his tone grounded. I didn't come to Washington to win applause. I came here to remind Americans that hope is still possible and that their faith matters. If that offends celebrities who think this nation should operate like a late-night monologue, so be it. Clips of that line instantly hit X, racking up retweets faster than any statement he'd made before. Obama to Bournemouth. This isn't about Stephen Colbert. It's about the idea that fame equals authority, that social media followers are more valuable than the earnest voice of a community leader or a person of faith. Hannity leaned forward, clearly impressed. Did you expect this much backlash? Joel nodded slowly. Of course, that's how they operate. You speak your truth, and suddenly you're dangerous. But I'll take dangerous over dishonest. Meanwhile, in homes across the country, families watched with divided reactions. In Nebraska, a truck driver named Pete told his teenage daughter, "That man's got guts. Reminds me of Billy Graham, speaking truth to power." In Seattle, a college student tweeted, "He's terrifying, calm, polite, and absolutely relentless." The nation wasn't just watching, it was reacting in real time. Hashtags like Osteen Unfiltered and conviction over comedy soared. Even international outlets picked up the story. Stephen Colbert's PR team scrambled. They hadn't expected Joel to keep advocating with this much control. A Vanity Fair contributor posted, "Whether you agree or not, Joel Osteen is reshaping the public square. He doesn't rant, he uplifts with precision." Back in the studio, Hannity asked, "Where does this go from here?" Joel didn't miss a beat. "It goes wherever the message of hope and truth takes it. If that means calling out cynicism on both co-hosts, I'll do it. If that means being misunderstood by Hollywood, fine. But I won't be silent, and I won't pretend fleeting fame is more powerful than enduring faith." The final shot of the segment was simple. Joel, seated beneath the American flag, not smiling, not performing, just steady, composed, and unyielding. He wasn't finished. He was just getting started. The day after pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's Fox News appearance, the media was still buzzing. Headlines shifted tone, no longer just questioning his political affiliations, but analyzing his poise, his message, his growing influence. Even left-leaning outlets admitted Joel hadn't crumbled. He had controlled the firestorm. Behind his temporary West Wing desk, Joel quietly read an email from a Kansas widow. "I lost my husband to fentanyl. Thank you for reminding them our pain matters too." That meant more than any trending hashtag. Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert canceled appearances. His team tried to spin his silence as strategic, but inside New York media circles, whispers grew louder. He picked the wrong target. Joel, however, wasn't celebrating. He called his staff together. "We're not reacting anymore. We lead." He began shaping a message bigger than any feud, one rooted in faith, resilience, and purpose. At a national faith conference in Dallas, he stood before a crowd of thousands and said, "They told me to stay quiet. Instead, I stood, and the room recognized a deeper truth. No theatrics, no shouting, just conviction." And somewhere in New York, Stephen Colbert watched that clip, knowing exactly what had just happened. 2 weeks had passed since the moment that froze the East Room, yet the country was still talking. What started as a celebrity jab had evolved into a national debate. One no longer about pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen versus comedian, actor, writer, and television host Stephen Colbert, but about what it meant to stand for something real in an age dominated by performance. Hollywood PR teams scrambled to protect reputations. Stephen Colbert released a carefully worded statement. "I never meant to insult anyone personally. I simply spoke my mind." But the damage was already done, not because Joel had destroyed him, but because he hadn't played the game. Joel turned down interviews with primetime anchors and glossy magazine spreads. He refused to sit down with a major network. "This isn't a career move," he told his staff. "This is a mission reaffirmation." That week, he spoke at a roundtable for young spiritual leaders. No big lights, no viral setup, just raw, honest conversation. "I've been mocked for my message, my faith, and my approach," he said. "But I'll never apologize for standing firm in conviction when others fold." A video clip from that event hit 1.2 million views in 24 hours, not because it was theatrical, but because it was true. Back in New York, Stephen watched the clip in silence. His team wanted to counter it, but he knew better. He had stepped into Washington expecting a soundbite and got something else entirely. A man who didn't shout but didn't shake either. One commentator summarized it best. Joel didn't just win an argument, he won credibility. And in 2025, that's rarer than fame. A month later, the noise quieted, but the shift remained. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen wasn't just a spiritual leader anymore. He had become something few in public life truly are. A symbol, not of a denomination, not of a political faction, but of clarity and conviction in a time ruled by noise. One morning he returned to the same East Room where it all began. The chandeliers shimmered. The press was absent, no stage, no script. It was a leadership breakfast for young community organizers. Quiet, sincere. When he spoke, he didn't mention Stephen Colbert. He didn't need to. Sometimes the strongest response isn't a headline. It's just being the one who didn't back down. Afterward, a young man no older than 18 approached him, nervous, but wide-eyed. "You made me believe I could share my faith without fear," he said. Joel smiled. "Then share." Back at the West Wing, he reviewed a new wave of speaking requests from universities, think tanks, even international groups. He accepted none. For now, his mission was still here. President Trump stopped by his office later that day. "You ready to run for something?" he joked. Joel didn't answer right away. He looked out the window down Pennsylvania Avenue. "I didn't do this to run. I did it so people would stop running from hope." Outside, life moved on. But the image of that night, the moment he rose to speak, steady and unshaken, lingered in the minds of millions. Stephen Colbert eventually returned to his screen, but something in his tone changed, less sharp, more cautious, because he, like the rest of the country, had seen what happened when a celebrity mocked a man of conviction. The lights didn't dim on Joel. They got brighter. And when the applause faded, he was still standing. In a world where laughter is often louder than truth and where fame can overpower conviction, one moment inside the White House changed the dynamic. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't shout. He didn't insult. He simply stood up calmly, boldly, and without apology. He reminded a nation that titles don't make someone powerful. Truth does. And sometimes the most powerful answer to mockery is quiet, unshakable conviction. This wasn't just a clash between Hollywood and faith. It was a mirror reflecting who we are and who we choose to listen to. And in that reflection, millions saw something they hadn't seen in a long time. A man who didn't flinch. So the next time someone tells you to sit down, stay silent, or know your place, remember Joel. Remember that one clear voice can silence a room full of noise, and that sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Because the truth doesn't shout, it stands. If you were captivated by Joel Osteen's calm, powerful stand against Stephen Colbert, or if you love seeing those big, unpredictable moments where real life beats scripted comedy, you're in the right place. Don't let the noise silence you. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the biggest, most shocking clashes in politics, media, and culture. What did you think of Osteen's response? Did Colbert truly get shut down? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.